So I'm Misael. I'm a Boston-based artist. I went to school at Mass Art, and I refer to myself as a multimedia artist. Being like a multimedia artist for me is kind of like wearing all these different hats, like so to speak. I know I went to school for photography at Mass Art, but I knew that that just wasn't the only thing I wanted to do. Originally, I wanted to be like a graphic designer, and then shortly after, I wanted to get into architecture. So I think a lot of what I do just kind of stems from all these different mediums and all these different professions, and just kind of incorporating all those things into what I already know, which is photo, and how can I like heighten that experience as like a photographer, to like, create an experience for other people to come in and then, feel that. Tension, that body of work was essentially me just exploring with an old canvas that I had like lying in the studio. I was just looking over through like references on like Pinterest of like different ways that I could utilize that canvas, because I knew I wanted to do something, but I just didn't know exactly what. And I just had a ratchet strap lying around, so I was just like, oh, just kind of wrapped it around, just playing with like form and just like composition of just like how I wanted to lay things out. Then eventually I just kind of was like, oh, what if I just snap it? I was looking at something on Pinterest for like, an artist that did a similar thing, but they did it with like a whole entire wall. And I just thought that that idea of just like transforming a space and utilizing a whole entire space as the art itself was interesting. So I wanted to kind of translate that into this canvas that I had. And that's kind of like what stemmed that idea. A lot of it was just kind of viewing materials that are used in like, I guess, like architectural design, that sort of stuff. That's kind of like the influence for that body of work. It was really just kind of me experimenting with like, what can I do with a 3D form, and how can I kind of freeze that? It's like, how do I take something that I've learned over the years at, my studies at Mass Art, being a photographer. It's like one of the biggest things is like preserving an image, right? Like as a photographer, that's kind of what you do. It's a still image in time that's frozen forever that you captured. So it's like, how do I do the same action, but like in a 3D form, in this kind of sculptural form? And that's where like the canvas and that's where the barrels kind of come into play, where it's like, I wanted to crush them, but then it's like, how do I keep this new identity or this new form of like what I just did? So it's like trying to figure that out and like kind of weaving through that to get to that end process of like what tension is. So the barrels for tension, those were just, honestly, I found those like just outside of our studio. There's like a whole like industrial like trash can thing that we have where we just go and everyone just kind of dumps everything. And there was like 4 barrels, and it was just those 2 specific barrels. It was like a white, and then there's like kind of like a cream color barrel. And I knew I wanted to do something with them. I just didn't really like know how I was gonna do it. So I wanted to kind of mimic the same thing that I was doing with the canvases, onto the barrels themselves. So it was just a matter of trying to figure out like, how am I gonna crush these? At first, I just started hammering at it, thinking like that's gonna work. But then I realized like these are like stainless steel barrels, and they're not just gonna crack under a few hammer hits. So eventually I looked to my uncle who works in construction, and that was kind of like my way of like cheating it a bit, where I wanted to crush them, but I wanted to have a specific form. So he had this giant like industrial claw that just pressed down on the barrels themselves. And then from that, I was kind of guiding him. It was interesting because it's like there was so many people that were essentially working with me, collaborating on making the barrels come out the way that I wanted it to come out. Which was interesting in itself, because I didn't know that I could have so much control over how I can, change the form of something to be entirely new. And then once you add the ratchet straps on it, it almost feels as if like these 2 barrels were just crushed together by the ratchet straps themselves. I think that was the illusion that I wanted to give off. It's just like, how to you take a can of soda, right? And if you crush it in your hands, it's kind of that similar impact to that. And I wanted to mimic that, but like on a larger scale. So upcycling in terms of my pieces, I think was just, I've always been a person that just likes to kind of repurpose things or just reuse something. And if I know that, if I can just think of an idea of a certain piece that maybe served a different function for something else, it's like, why not use it? It's like, it's already there, it's already accessible. It's kind of like when people say like one man's trash is another man's treasure sort of thing. And I think that's the way that I saw it. Like even for the barrels were literally going to be tossed and they were probably just going to end up in some scrap yard somewhere. So instead I was just like, oh, let me just take it and just do something with it. Tension to me, like why I named it that was, I mean, it's kind of straightforward for what the pieces are. It's like when you take the ratchet straps and you wrap it around and you just keep pulling on it and pulling on it, and you're like adding more stress. You're adding literal tension to the pieces. So after tension, I want to focus back on making photographs of my family and probably dive into like a little bit of like video where it's like kind of documentary behind the scenes based of my family and like highlighting them in like a good way. In terms of that, like I did a body of work that was dealing with like my mental health of, how I viewed myself in the home, like living with my parents, that sort of thing. And that was like a whole series on its own. And now this is something that I want to revisit again and just highlight my family in the best way possible. At the same time, like also highlight my community. Like being a Salvadorian, like I feel like there's not a lot of outreach, or there's not a lot of like other Salvadorian or photographers or multimedia artists or just overall just artists in general. I don't really see that in kind of a Salvadorian community. So that's a whole series and body of work that I want to do, is highlighting my community, highlighting my family, and just having an exhibition like way later down the line. There's beautiful immigrants out there. There's beautiful like Salvadorian people out there that are doing incredible things and that are hard workers, and that's something that I feel like I kind of want to give back. And the way that I can give back is through my art. Like I know that a lot of the work that I make is like guided by intuition, and I feel like that's what I always tell myself when I make any artwork, is like it's always just guided by like what I feel feels right in the moment. Thanks everyone for watching. If you want to keep up with me, my socials are on IG. I'm active on there. It's Jerry_Misael. And if you want to see more of my work and all the stuff that I've done in the past, it's my website is jerrymisael.com. I'm sure you can probably get all the information down below or wherever it is. But yeah, peace out, guys.